Hello there everyone, UXW Bill here with you once again, and today I present another adventure into household appliance repair related science. What you're looking at here is our 2005 late 2005 era, almost 2006 Kenmore dishwasher, manufactured by Whirlpool, as practically all of Sears' major appliances are. And this particular unit, well, it dropped dead recently. My mother left it to run a cycle after my brother, the key keeper, and my father cleaned out the screen around the pump drain area. And when she came back, the control panel was completely unresponsive and there was water still in the bottom of the unit. Still is, in fact. Which is probably getting to the point where it really smells good, although I don't notice any obnoxious odor. Certainly see that this unit is a little grunty. But it's been my experience that even with upkeep, dishwashers they just kind of get that way for some reason. So I hope you won't yell at me too much. For those of you who are wondering about what this blue colored thing is, that's actually where the seldom used drying assistant goes. You know, Jet Dry brand, at least that's the name under which they sell it here in the United States. Probably took this unit apart rather further than I had to. And this front panel actually just kind of fell out of its own accord. But what ended up happening, once again, it is the simplest things which bring the more complex machines in our lifestyles to a grinding halt. There is a little fuse that is mounted right in the vicinity of the control panel. In fact, if I pick it up here, you can actually see where it's intended to fasten to the board. And although my opinion of appliances with electronic control panels is quite low, it has to be said that this one has actually done quite well for itself. There's no evidence of burning or charring or anything along those lines. The only thing I've ever noticed about this machine is that periodically some or all of the buttons on the front panel would quit responding. And I always chalk that up to bad solder joints. But it seems that that probably can't be the case unless they were right here at the point where the flex cable connects to the microcontroller board in this particular unit. And I looked at all of those under very strong light. They definitely do not appear to be bad. But when this thing would ignore its buttons, a sharp whack to the front panel would put it right. So maybe there's some kind of an issue with the membrane. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that it's not a separate service part. I don't imagine that you're intended, maybe even able, to take this front button board apart, the membrane board, and service it in any way, shape, or form. You probably just have to get a whole new front panel for this unit. But this at least does come apart as a separate assembly. So what happened to this thing? Well, as previously mentioned, that little fuse just opened up, probably after many years of, motor starts demanding a lot of current from the unit and the onboard heating element demanding power as well. The new thermal fuse kit isn't too terribly expensive. They're right in the neighborhood of 20 bucks, which is a lot for a fuse. There's probably a lot of markup involved. But it also comes with a bit of wiring harness and a set of instructions as well. And for some reason, about which I am not entirely clear, they actually want you to replace this particular tan wire leading from the door switch, going into the wiring harness here, working its way down to one side of the thermal fuse, and then the other side of the thermal fuse over here. Now in the case of this particular connection, it's a simple matter of just unplugging it from the switch right here, tracing it back through the harness, carefully disassembling this bundle of wiring, putting it back together in the proper way, of course. Shouldn't take shortcuts, because especially if this unit wasn't plugged into a properly grounded outlet and a wire carrying electrical power came to touch the frame, well, the user could have a very shocking experience, especially with an appliance such as this one that handles water. So you take that apart, you free up this wire, and you're supposed to discard it. I think I'll keep it as a test lead or something because it looks perfectly fine. If it weren't for the fact that the instructions seem to be fairly emphatic about replacing it, I'd probably just leave it in there because it doesn't look burned or damaged or anything like that. Then the other portion of it goes into this connector, which actually connects to the front panel control board, and you need to use a paper clip to liberate this. So in just a moment I'm going to do exactly that. Then I shall hook up the control panel, put this unit back together, and see if it springs back to life. I'm told that 9 times out of 10 these units blow the fuse for no particularly good reason. other than the fact that the fuse probably just gets tired after many years of dealing with high current from, again, motor starts and the power drawn from the heating element. As I went to go ahead and put this metal cover back in place, this is just the decorative front for the machine, I noticed something very interesting about it. First of all, a little bit of backstory. The control panel here very clearly indicates that different color models of this dishwasher were made, which is pretty logical. But here's something that I stumbled across, and if I'm correct about its purpose, I actually think it's pretty neat. Both sides of this metal panel have a very nice finish on them. In fact, it's quite reflective. You can see the very ugly cameraman in the background here. I'm wondering if they painted this both colors so that in the event that a black colored machine was coming down the line, that they could just flip this panel over and install it, and the other unused side would be white. Now, obviously, in the case of this machine, the business end of the whole operation here is white. Now, the only thing I have to figure out at this point, and really when you're disassembling anything, you ought to make notes on how it went together so you can actually get it back together, is which side is up. You'll notice this is slightly crimped down here. I don't know if that happened while removing it, but I don't think so because I was very careful. And I don't know if that crimped side goes toward the top or the bottom of the unit. If I had to guess, I'd say it probably goes toward the top. Now, another thing you should certainly pay attention to whenever you're doing this yourself, although this is not meant as a how-to video, you should make notes of where all the cables and connections on the various circuit boards and junction points actually go. Now, in this case, I did not have to do that because Whirlpool color codes all their wiring harnesses, as with most manufacturers of mass-produced electrical goods, and the color codes are also printed on the circuit board. So even if someone was being particularly drowsy during this machine's process down the assembly line or its repair at some point in the future, like we're doing right now, they would be able to get it back together correctly. I've gone ahead and run the new piece of wire from the door switch right here. You can see I went ahead and cleaned that up. Gave a couple other parts of this machine, including the front panel, a good cleaning as well. And then I installed the other portion of the new wiring harness in this connector. And in order to do this, all in the world that you have to do is simply push a paper clip up in there, and Bob's your uncle, or in my case, late grandfather.
Ready now, take one!
Don't fall. Okay, well, the new fuse is installed, and so far it's doing better than my dad is at walking across the kitchen. Although I suppose if the dishwasher walks across the kitchen, better make sure you haven't inadvertently put too many computers in it or something. But here we are, all hooked up and ready to go. Got the new fuse in place. The wiring harnesses are reconnected. Need to go ahead and connect this one. This solenoid that you're looking at right now actually serves to open the two dispensers for not only the jet dry, but also the detergent as well. And it just fires those back in, thus releasing the latches that held them closed inside the unit. The other thing that I have to do is remount the door switch, and this might be a little bit of a delicate ballet, but one thing that I have done in preparation for it, I have gone ahead and cleaned all of this off as best I could. I didn't do nearly such a great job when I was working inside the unit, but the less you know about that, the better. Besides, it's a dishwasher. It'll probably clean itself eventually. Also went ahead and got the warm air outlet vent that's used during the dry cycle here. So we'll go ahead and put this thing back together, and then it'll be time for everyone's favorite smoke test!
Quiet on the set, take two.
Alright everybody, we're back. I've got the unit back together. It was a bit of a struggle, I will admit. Mainly because I didn't take very careful notes on how it came apart in the first place. But the way you've got to do this is kind of like building a sandwich. You have to put the black plastic cover that shields the electronics in place first. Then you put the door latch in place, you route all the wiring, the control panel can go into place then, you can screw it down, and then finally the insulating pad and the metal front panel, they have to go in place, and the way that you have to do this, there's no lip holding them in at the bottom, and this one's unfortunately a bit splayed out. You have to seat it at the top, the sides, and just hope for the best with the bottom. But now the moment you've all been waiting for has arrived. Go ahead and shut the door on this thing. Pull it out from the wall. And go ahead, get it into position here, and hook it up to the sink, because this is a portable dishwasher, not a built-in model. I believe it could optionally be built in if you desired to do such a thing, but if you forget to attach this little hose and there's water inside the unit, you get to irrigate your kitchen floor, which is always a good time. It's hard to do that one-handed too. So anyway, now some of you in the audience are probably raising the question at this point, what if the fuse blows again? What if there's something really wrong? Well, that's definitely a possibility, but I did do some ohmmeter checks on this thing, and the heating element and the motor at least seem to be, at least as far as a multimeter is concerned, okay. One of the most common methods of failure of these machines involves the pump seals. The pump seals go bad and they'll drown the motor. That doesn't usually result in blowing a fuse, at least not before the motor has had a chance to go ahead and smoke out your entire house, and it's wonderful smelling smoke. The only company that's ever done anything about that was Maytag. They used to offset the motor and connect it to a pump with a belt so that if the pump did fail, the motor would survive and you could simply replace the pump and go again. But even they don't even exist anymore, don't do it that way now. So, the moment of truth, folks. Smoke test! Let's see what we got. Alright, the control panel has come back to life. This thing is supposed to remember during what portion of the cycle it was in when the power goes out or anything like that. There's an EEPROM on the board, like a 93C10 or something, and I think that's probably where the microcontroller writes the cycle information, because this thing has been without power for several days and there's no power reserve on the board. So here we go. Will it pop the fuse or will it drain? Well, it didn't register my pressing the start button. That's always fun. Okay, it didn't register the start button for some reason, but it did accept cancel drain, and it is running right now. So I guess the next thing we'll do, since we've been without a dishwasher for about a week now, is throw some dishes in it and see what happens. But it is draining itself at the very least, which is a good sign. Alright everyone, here's the way it stands right now. The control panel on this thing has been iffy in the past. There's been buttons that don't work properly on it, and again, administering a sharp whack to the front panel usually fixes it. Seems to have done so in this case. I did inspect the primary microcontroller board for bad solder joints by carefully flexing the connector and the pins back and forth. I didn't find any. So that's got me stumped for the moment, but it's working right now. And usually when it works, it stays working for a great deal of time. And then something from the corrections, amplifications, and clarifications department. There is in fact a kind of lip that holds the metal panel in place down here. There has to be, because otherwise when you open the door it tends to want to fall out or buckle in the middle or do something. But it's this plastic piece, and you've got to carefully work it back into place, which I did with a deftly applied kitchen knife, just running it along the seam at the bottom here until the metal was fully seated. And so that, for now at least, concludes the repair of this Kenmore Quietgard 1 dishwasher manufactured for Sears by Whirlpool. Thank you as always for watching, and feel free to leave a comment if you have one.